I'm Brian Lilly. Justin Trudeau's disdain for our military. That is the topic of tonight's byline. If you know anything about the Trudeau family, you know they have no time for Canada's military. Yesterday, Justin Trudeau showed that once again he follows in this fine family tradition. Trudeau was in London, Ontario for his party's winter caucus meetings, and while there, he agreed to appear on AM 980 with my friend, talk show host Andrew Lawton. Lawton is a self-identified conservative. Before becoming a broadcaster, he was an activist and blogger. He helped bring Ann Coulter to London for an appearance at the University of Western Ontario. So kudos to Trudeau for going on the air with Andrew, and kudos to Andrew for running a very professional and respectful interview. But while Andrew was being respectful, that doesn't mean he turned his brain off. He listened carefully to what Trudeau was saying. And after some questions and answers on domestic issues, Lawton asked Trudeau about Canada's engagement with ISIS. Now, Trudeau said he disagreed with the Prime Minister on his take on the issue. Nothing new there. We know that. But then Lawton asked Trudeau this question. Listen carefully to the question, the answer, and the follow-up.
Under what circumstances, as Prime Minister, do you think it would be justifiable to deploy Canadian Armed Forces in a combat role? Because a lot of people, looking at some of the absolute carnage that have come out of that part of the world, have said, you know, this is probably a good area for military intervention. So under what circumstances, as Prime Minister, would that be warranted in your eyes?
Oh, I think it's warranted if there's a reasonable chance of success, if there's a way that Canada can offer expertise that the rest of the world is unable to provide.
So just to clarify, are you saying there's no chance of success with the fight against ISIS?
Oh, I'm saying that this is going to be a very long challenge against ISIS, and Canada's role in engaging with that needs to be best suited to what we can do better than other countries, and on humanitarian support, on refugee support, on military missions that are non-combat, whether it's medical support, logistics support, or even the kind of training that we got very good at in Afghanistan.
Now, Trudeau's answer shows he doesn't have faith in Canada's military. We can have different views on whether Canada should be there, how Canada can best contribute, but when Trudeau's words, I mean, listen to them. They say he doesn't have faith that our men and women in uniform can do the job. He says we should join a combat mission if there's a reasonable chance for success. That's like saying only pick a fight you can win, and he obviously doesn't think Canada can win here. Pushed on what he said, he went on and said we should do the jobs we're best suited for, non-combat jobs. What does that say of his view of the military? One of those non-combat jobs, by the way, was, well, he mentioned training. Well, Andrew kept pushing him on under what circumstances Trudeau as Prime Minister would see a combat mission as warranted. And listen again to the question and the answer, and what Trudeau says about our soldiers, the ones there to train Iraqis when they came under fire.
We're coming to the end of our time together this afternoon. I have to ask you one more time, though, Mr. Trudeau, because I'm really not getting an answer for you on this. Is there any scenario that you can give where a Canadian combat operation would be warranted?
Oh, it's not a scenario that I can give. It's the fact that, yes, there would be scenarios in that, but we have to look at what Canada has best to offer and what we're actually going to be able to be successful in a meaningful way around. And in terms of justifying and selling that, any military mission needs to be done with the approval and the support of the Canadian people. And the fact is that Mr. Harper was misleading to Canadians when he assured us that there would be no ground combat against ISIS by Canadians, and we found out yesterday that Canadians have been engaged in ground combat.
Yes, they were defending themselves. So in Trudeau's world, Canadian soldiers being shot at while training the soldiers of other nations, they shouldn't return fire? I know that elsewhere Trudeau said, of course Canadian soldiers can defend themselves, but now he's using those same soldiers defending themselves to attack the government and saying they were lying to Canadians. What does he want Canada to do? Apparently he says we should be helping to defang ISIS.
There's a lot of different paths that need to be taken by the international community to defang and to neutralize ISIS, and I think Canada absolutely should be an important part of that, and that's what I'm committed to.
So he wants us to defang ISIS, neutralize ISIS, but we shouldn't be involved in combat because we can't win. This man is confused beyond belief. He also goes on and on about how we need to do more than just a military effort. Canada, along with other countries, is providing substantial humanitarian aid. We're providing refugee assistance, including resettling refugees here. But he ignores that because to him, our military, the military has no faith in, well, they're no more than a tool to beat the government with, a punchline for his bad jokes.
Why aren't we talking more about the kind of humanitarian aid that Canada can and must be engaged in, rather than, trying to whip out our CF-18s and show them how big they are?
Like I said, this follows a family tradition of hating the military. His father, Pierre, famously rode around Montreal on a motorcycle in European military uniforms, including a World War I German army helmet. And this was in the middle of the Second World War. Did Pierre Trudeau, who was in his 20s all through that war, sign up to fight the Nazis? No. But he did make sure to visit and praise communist China and Cuba while those places were killing their own people. As Prime Minister, Trudeau gutted military spending. When he took over from Lester Pearson in 1968, Canada spent 2.5% of GDP on the military. We had a division in Europe. We had an aircraft carrier and a battle group to go with it. We had a substantial military. Trudeau took spending as low as 1.7%, then an all-time low. We lost the aircraft carrier. We lost a lot of capabilities. Morale plummeted, and so did the number of Canadians in the ranks. It's well documented that Pierre Trudeau viewed the military with contempt. Now, one of his sons, Sasha, actually joined the military while in university. He joined the Royal Canadian Hussars as an officer in training, but he didn't complete his training. He's now a documentary filmmaker and foreign policy advisor to Justin. Now, to give you an idea of Sasha, well, he holds Fidel Castro out to be a Superman. His words, not mine. And he partnered with the Iranian government on one of his documentaries. Sasha is one of Justin's top foreign policy advisors. Now, why does all of this matter? Well, it matters because Justin Trudeau wants to be Prime Minister. It matters because polls continually show Trudeau and his Liberals winning a majority of the popular vote. And it matters because most of the media are acting as cheerleaders for Trudeau. They won't tell you about all of this. So if Trudeau does win the election, if he does become Prime Minister, then he is in charge of Canada's military and our foreign policy, as well as troop deployments. Constitutionally, Parliament has no say in foreign affairs or troop deployments. Stephen Harper has made it a habit of taking votes to the Commons, but prime ministers don't need to do that. Do we want someone in charge of the military that has no faith in their abilities beyond handing out blankets and parkas and winter survival gear? I don't think the Harper government funds the military properly, but they have begun to re-equip the men and women in uniform with the tools they need to do the jobs Canadians want and need done. Canada can't afford for its military to go backwards again under another Trudeau. And that's the byline.
I was very clear from the very beginning that the Liberal Party, of course, understands the need for Canada to be a strong partner with the international community in the pushback against the global terrorism represented by ISIS and a very real threat to both regional and global security. However, my disagreement with the Prime Minister over the best way to do that is well known. The issue today is very much that the Prime Minister made assurances to Canadians and to the House that, as we found out yesterday, were not exactly the truth.
Tonight's top story, Justin Trudeau and his relationship with the military. That was Trudeau in London, Ontario yesterday, speaking again about Canada's military operation against ISIS and the fact that Canadian troops training Iraqis when they came under fire fired back. Toronto Sun columnist Warren Kinsella joins me now in Toronto. Warren, this is weird all around. We've already heard the interview comments with Andrew Lawton, but let me start there with Trudeau's comments. He's on the one hand saying, yes, they have the right to defend themselves if they're fired upon, but he's also trying to use it as a political wedge. I don't know any Canadian, left, right, center, upside down, that's going to say our troops shouldn't fire back if they come under fire.
Yeah, and you're quite right, left and right. This morning I posted a criticism on my website about that interview that he did with Mr. Lawton, and I had people from the left and the right saying that they were bewildered by his response. And his response was, Andrew Lawton asked him a very sensible question, which is, you're opposed to engaging with ISIS, is that right? And what's your reason for taking that position? And Trudeau said, well, because I'm concerned about our ability to win. And then Lawton said, obviously, well, are you saying that you think we're going to lose?
Yeah.
So, I mean, the answer, I don't know if he was poorly prepared for this interview, Brian, or he was just winging it. I don't know what the problem was, but the answer, quite simply, was they are now engaged in combat, at least they were a few days ago. Our obligation, my obligation, if I hope to be Prime Minister, is to support the men and women in uniform we have over there in harm's way unequivocally. That's your answer. Instead of getting into these hypotheticals, as he tends to do on foreign affairs, and then he gets himself into trouble. You know,
it's part of what was puzzling me yesterday as both Tom Mulcair and Justin Trudeau went after Harper over this, because they both say that, you know, they support the idea of training Iraqi troops. They don't want our guys on the front lines. Guess what? I don't want our guys on the front lines of this fight. I'm fine, you know, bomb them from the air, whatever. I don't want our guys on the front lines. But they came under fire while they're training Iraqi troops. Do they really want us to go back to the bad old days? I mean, Jean Chrétien dealt with this with UN peacekeeping missions where Canadian troops weren't allowed to fire back. And I think that ticked them off, and the rules of engagement changed. But it sounds like Trudeau and Mulcair, you know, they're okay with that, and they want to play these parliamentary games that didn't work for Iggy in the last election. I don't think they'll work for these guys.
And the example you give with Mr. Chrétien is a good one. You know, when I had the privilege of working for him, I recall quite clearly our contribution in Kosovo and Afghanistan was much more significant than what Prime Minister Harper has done in this case in the Middle East, number one. And number two, it was not a peacekeeping role, it was a peacemaking role. It was a combat role in both instances, and it was a Liberal government who did that. So all I can speculate, Brian, is Justin believes that there are votes to be had with that NDP constituency who opposes the military in every single instance. And I think he's making a big mistake, because that is not the tradition of the Liberal Party. That is the tradition of the New Democrats, not the Liberal Party.
All right, your column on Tuesday, you said again that the shine might be coming off of him after the Lawton interview. You said it has you worried. Does this help play into a narrative about Justin Trudeau, these events over the last week?
Well, here you and I are talking about it. And, you know, my mom, we're Alberta Liberals. We're as hardcore as it can get. And she said, she's my one-person focus group, and I think you know her. And she said, you know, Warren, I just can't picture him. I like him very much, but I can't picture him handling these types of incidents. And the problem with, you know, the interviews that he did in London and the stand-up that he did in London is it's hurting that, and it's providing further evidence that he is not, in fact, ready to handle these difficult files. And, you know, you shouldn't be handing your opponent ammunition, particularly when your opponent is a guy with a size 10 brain like Stephen Harper.
All right, and of course, playing into the narrative not only the Conservatives are doing, but the New Democrats now as well. Warren, good talking, and we'll chat soon.
Thanks, my friend.
Email us your thoughts, byline@sunmedia.ca.